Hi everyone, this is Glenn Stewart, Gull War veteran, and I'm speaking with David LaShell, LaShell, another Gull War veteran. We're going to discuss the matter of Gull War illness. Hey David.
Hello, Glenn. How you doing?
Okay, and so I got a couple of questions here I want to ask you. And first off, during the first Gulf War, what units did you serve with, and what time frames?
In February to March 1990, I was with the 806 Bomb Wing Provisional in RAF Fairford. We flew B-52 missions out of England over the Republican Guard in Baghdad, mostly industrial complexes. I left in March, closed our base down, went to Seymour Johnson. From Seymour Johnson, I went back to Dhahran, Saudi Arabia in October of 93 to January of 94. And our mission was taking out any ground radar sites or missile sites in Iraq in the southern border.
Okay, and what was your position during the deployment?
I was a superintendent of flight line. I managed bomb loading, bomb maintenance, aircraft maintenance in both cases. Worked as an aircraft electrician and environmental specialist.
Now, what do you recall doing the deployment?
In RAF Fairford, it was just mostly load and go. We loaded bombs up in the evening. We'd launch in the morning. We'd recover in the evening. We were responsible to make sure that it was ready to go on the next bombing mission. I can say that in Fairford, our first 3 or 4 missions were low-level bombers. So we would go low-level and 3 aircraft sorties. One would go in, the next one go in after it, and the third one would be to cover whatever didn't happen the first 2.
Yeah.
In Seymour, we had missions specifically looking for sites that would come up on our radar and then take them out. I can say that in 93, 94, we were actually bombing as much as if I was in a real wartime.
Yeah. Now, while deploying, did you start to develop health problems while deploying? And if so, describe them. Or did your health problems start to develop after the deployment?
I can say that during, even in England, there was an issue of instability. It was anxiety. It was almost like there was a full adrenaline flow constantly. We had no release. In Dhahran, when I was there, it was constant go. The thought of being in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia, you're always looking over your shoulder to see what was behind you, your surroundings.
Yeah.
I did have an issue after a mild sandstorm with my eyes, and I did go in and have it checked. As a result, I do have a disability for dry eye syndrome.
All right. So once you got back and you started developing health problems, did you start reporting these, going on sick hole and getting them reported?
While I was in service, I didn't do quite as much. I was close to retirement time. So at Seymour Johnson, I would go in periodically just to get my health examined. Not until after I got out did I really have results that were evident as far as what happened in the Gulf.
Okay. Now, I remember when I was in the military, they were offering a PGI examination, which was the Pacific Gulf Illness. That's what they were calling it back then, examination. I participated in that. They ran all kinds of tests, blood tests, you name it, and of course, everything came back inconclusive. Did you participate in any of those tests?
No, I had none of those specifically related to time. Um, I retired after 20 years in 1994, and I had a full physical when I got out. At that time is when I received my first disabilities, is on retirement.
Now, can you tell me when you actually realized that you were suffering, all your health problems were actually ailments related to Gulf War illness? That this is what you were actually coming down with?
Um, Actual realization that it was Gulf War illness, I never had thought about it early on. Thinking back, I can relate now that as early as 96, 97, I started having problems, and it kept growing and growing and growing. It wasn't until 2004 when it really affected me the worst. I ended up losing a job.
Okay,
And it
so
wasn't just a minor, you know, minimum pay job. I had a very well-paying job when I lost it.
yeah. Okay, so this was something that, like, example in my case, um, the symptoms, the ailments were very mild back then, and they started progressing later on with years. They started getting worse and worse, and like with me, they didn't really start going full blown, I would say around 2008. 2008, around that time frame is when it really started, hit me hard. Is that what happened?
That's
When,
exactly. I can say it really started hitting me bad in 2004. I wasn't myself. I was in denial of it as an Air Force veteran rather than a Army or Marine where it was actually combat oriented. I really thought I didn't have anything to do with it. Mine was fully developed in time. It kept creating problems for me in my living style from, like I say, around 96, 97. It just kept building and building and building. Um, in 2009, it got to a point where I was seeing the VA, and a social worker actually came up to me and talked to me a little bit, and then took me in and introduced me to what was then Gulf War syndrome. She showed me the paperwork. She showed me the symptoms of Gulf War syndrome. She gave me a paper to read, and she says, what you need to do is read this and take a look at it and see exactly how my symptoms related to my time in the Persian Gulf. I was surprised to see it. I really was.
now, have you submitted any claims with the Veterans Administration in relation to your service?
Yes. When I first got out, like I say, I received a disability of 30%. It was 10% for my eyes, 10% for my lumbar, degenerative disc, degenerative joint, and then 10% for my knee, with a 0% on hearing and a mention of another hand problem that I had, that it was actually service connected but not rated. In 2009, when the social worker talked with me, is when I first initially filed under the Gulf War illness conditions. Of the 12 conditions that were listed, I didn't file for menstrual or for cognitive, but neurological, disassociation, had a anxiety disorder that I couldn't, a sleeping problem, had headaches, couldn't think correctly. I was about to lose my family, and I said it was time I started doing something about it. So I filed in 2009 for nine conditions of the symptoms. I didn't have any diagnosis. I had no idea what was going on or what would become of it.
Okay. Now, were you satisfied with the VA's decision, and have you submitted any appeals?
Of the ones I filed in 2009, I was rated on everything. I got, along with the eyes, the lumbar, and the knee, I received an additional increase in my lumbar and my thorax, a 20% increase, or a 20% on my cervical, which was separate, diarrhea, GERD, hiatal hernia, what they call servogenic headaches, migraines. It was excruciating. Filed for a general anxiety disorder, and I'm trying to think of all of them. It's kind of tough to remember everything. Of those that I filed, of all 9 of them, there were 2 that I had to put on appeal. One was my cervical and my lumbar. It took me over 2 years before they finally settled the appeal, but in the process of putting in for the Gulf War symptoms, they did it all at the same time, and I went from a 40% to a 90% rating. I went in February of 2012 and filed for rheumatoid arthritis and individual unemployability. They wouldn't give me a rating on the rheumatoid arthritis, but they give me individual unemployability and P&T up to 100%.
Okay, so your claims are closed, and how long did it take for those to complete out?
Well, if you count from 2009 to 2012, it took over 3 years. I had been fighting with them since 2005. I put in certain claims that I never filed appeals on, so I refiled, and then with the additional information from the VA is what I got.
Now, you and me have talked about deployed. You know, we've talked about this a couple of times, deployed versus non-deployed. And, you know, there's a lot of veterans, even Gulf War veterans, that to this day will say, you know, they hold to the argument that in order to claim Gulf War illness, you know, it has to be boots on the ground. Now, I was boots on the ground, you were not. However, my opinion is this. This is how I see it, right? I'm going to illustrate this. Here we have one container, right? Deployed. You know, there's your baseline. And then here's the non-deployed. And then same baseline, right?
Correct.
Now, here's my issue when it comes to Gulf War illness. Okay, we take a couple of ingredients, right? So you take the non-deployed and you add on the anthrax vaccine, right? You take the deployed and you add on anthrax vaccine. Okay, so far, you know, they're looking pretty similar, right? However, now we get to situations where you take the deployed element and you add like sarin gas, but you omit it from the other ones. Now, however, here's my thinking about that too, because because of the fact that there were a lot of planes constantly going in and out and going back to the carriers, right? And they were flying through this stuff. Not only that, but the equipment that was brought back to the rear, etc., was also in that area of contamination, right? You're still being exposed to that. So I'm not going to totally omit it from the non-deployed, but we'll give it a little bit less, you know. Okay. Now you add on the ingredient of the PV pills and Cypro, right? PV pills and Cypro. But you stir that around. Basically, what they ended up doing with us is they made a cocktail drink with us.
Yeah.
Right? Now, you see there's a little bit of a difference there. Now, there's certain factors, you know, some people weren't forced to take the PV pills, other people were. Now, there's other factors also. You look at the fire wells, the oil wells, and all that stuff. My point is this, that I'm not a microbiologist, I'm not a scientist or anything like that. I look at it from the mathematical equation. You know, I look at the math of it. You know, you're still coming up with the cocktail drink.
Yep.
Right? So that's one of the reasons I would have to say when it comes to Gulf War Illness, you really cannot omit the non-deployed, because we have, you know, to this day, nobody has been able to say this is the single cause of what, you know, this is the cause of this ailment. You know.
Well, see, now that's where I can add to that theory of yours, okay? As a non-deployed to a deployed. What we did in RAF Fairford, you have to remember that the air campaign created a cloud that went over all of Iraq, part of Saudi Arabia, and on into Kuwait. With that, we were putting so much toxicants from the bombing into the air to add to all the rest. There are going to be, in my eyes, there's going to be a level. The level is going to determine, depending on where you were at what time. So those closest to the action, which were in there, were all the toxicants from all the air campaigns, plus what you've got there, and add all that back in along with the air campaign, the most affected will be those that are there.
Yeah.
If you draw that back to Riyadh, and it's still in the area, but the level is going to change because of the mixture of the air and the timing and everything else by the time it got to them. On top of that, think of the planes that went through there back to the home station back in Fairford. When you get back to that point, what was on those planes? Well, I can speak for that because they should have had an NBC, a decon team there to check the planes to see what kind of contaminants were on the planes. None were given. We don't know. We haven't got any way of proving that. But it only makes sense in common sense that something like that could happen.
See, that's another thing I remember when we went over there. I remember, you know, several false alarms, you know, well, supposed false alarms, you know, M8s going off and all that, right? But the report coming back from higher headquarters, of course, you know, was, oh, these are false alarms. Now, we had all this gear out there, all these trucks, all these tanks, all these, you name it, all that stuff was out there. Now, once everything was said and done, and it was time to pack and go home, we took those, you know, we turned around, we packed all the military equipment into the vans and so on, and we sent them down into the bay, and we didn't pack that stuff. That was pretty much handed over to civilian contractors, government contracts
Yep.
to wash it down, pack it down, and etc. But who knows what the heck we were carrying with us, considering that all these alarms were going off. You know, if you look at if we were exposed to mustard or anything like that, and they were not decontaminated, you're bringing that stuff back with you. You're exposing
Exactly.
other people.
Well, you got to look at it too in the fact that in a metabolism of each individual, and I hate to get into genetics because it doesn't work this way, but in the metabolism of an individual, a stronger person with the type of immune system that fights better versus one that doesn't fight at all, there are ones that are going to be more susceptible to most like decon. So you can see the difference between those who weren't affected and those that were.
Correct.
Okay. That's just a part of it. That's just a minor part. Every individual, I mean, if you catch a flu, I catch a flu, yours can get really bad leading into pneumonia. Mine, 2-3 days and I'm over it. That's just, that. It's a common sense kind of thing that they don't think about. One thing I've thought long and hard about, and that would be in the vaccination side. Think of it like this. I was 20 years in the Air Force. From the time I went in until the time I got out, I was on a worldwide mobility crew, meaning anywhere in the world at any time I could go. There were certain vaccinations that I had to have common to all areas that I couldn't wait until the day I left to get, so I had to keep up with a series of shots. One of those, for instance, is cholera, another one, yellow fever. So every 3 years I had to get a cholera, every 10 years I had to get a yellow fever. Think of those who came out of a basic training or out of a guard unit that didn't have to put up with that. All of a sudden, multiple vaccinations to include the anthrax and botulism. That is a menage, a group of vaccinations given to one person at a specific time. And it's hard telling. They don't know what could be, how it could help, what it would do to an individual.
I remember going through. I don't even. It was it not MEPS. I can't recall. Where they practically process you, like cattle. I remember, going through that where they double check your records, go through all your paperwork, make sure your will, all this was updated, your vaccinations. And I remember doing vaccinations. We got so many vaccinations. I definitely got the anthrax and I got the booster. But they gave us so many vaccinations. We had no idea what the heck they were giving us,
Exactly.
And you would ask them, and basically the response you got was like, that's none ya. Well, what's a none ya? None your dang business. That was the typical response. And you try to be nosy, look around, and some of that stuff wasn't even labeled. There was some of that stuff on there that I didn't even see a label on it,
Well, honestly, I have to give it that I don't, and this is where my thought pattern goes. I won't say that it's one or the other, or I won't say, no, it isn't that, no, it isn't this. Because when it comes down to vaccination, there's only one shot that I got, and that was the GG shot, gamma globin.
Yeah.
Other than that, I never received anthrax or botulism. So what mine primarily boiled down to is environmental, more environmental than anything else. Whatever was in the air, whatever was in the ground, whatever we ate in that area, that's something I had to contend with. And it was incredible the amount of insects and everything else that was surrounding us at any given time. It was pathetic,
The other thing that concerns me is You know, I've heard several reports of family members coming down once we got back. You know, there were a lot of family members coming down sick who never had any kind of health problems in the past, and all of a sudden they started developing health problems. You had children being born. That's one of the reasons I'm glad after the first Gulf War I never had any more kids, because you know the idea of having a child born with all kinds of ailments and so on, and because you know basically my fault, something that to be honest, I think some of this stuff we're still carrying with us. You know, it's in our system. It has altered our, well, I mean, if you look at the latest research, it has shown that it has altered our cell structure. You know,
Exactly. There are medications I'm taking for certain conditions that I'm rated for that that point towards the central nervous system and the damage that I may have received from it. Of all the things I carry, I can't say that the treatment has cured me. There is no such thing as cure. What I've got is a treatment that I can live with for now. I'm in constant pain, some worse than others. Some days it's worse than others. Um, the treatments are sufficient enough to keep me moderated. So far, I haven't run into that case where it's not doing me any good anymore. But I finally, here it is, 2014. I've been dealing with this since 97. 2014, I can say, is the first time I may have plateaued where, okay, I'm not adding more to my problem.
nope.
And I'm still seeing live.
Okay, go ahead. I don't know what that was. Go ahead.
But today, 7 years later, I finally hit a plateau where I'm not adding more conditions to my problems. It's not getting worse anymore. I've got it to a point where I can deal with it. And
Yeah.
it takes a lot for an individual to get to that point. Some may never do it. I know there's some that have not made it. Those that have passed away before us, they suffered and they suffered and they suffered, and it finally overtook them.
Yeah,
There's
I
some
know.
people that we've lost.
Now, a question I have, right? Recently, I went to the VA hospital and I was having some kind of problems with my eyes. So I went to the ER over there and I encountered a doctor that was down there that he told me, in his opinion, he was a Gulf War veteran. This is what surprises me. He was a Gulf War veteran also, but he told me flat out that there was no such thing as Gulf War illness. And that he was going to submit a recommendation for mental evaluation for me. Now, when he told me that, I almost started busting out laughing. You know, I looked at him and I just said, you know what? Do whatever you want, because I'm so accustomed to doctors looking at me like I'm crazy that what we have, over 200,000 of us apparently have psychosomatic mental condition. You know? But have you encountered that with some of the VA doctors?
I am fortunate. No, I have not received a doctor yet that has said no. I've been very fortunate in that I've been able to show them certain research about Gulf War and some of the illnesses that we came down with, and they work with me on it. I know there's a lot out there that don't. I'm
Yeah.
also very fortunate to know that when I put in for Gulf War syndrome and the symptoms, every condition that I put in, 9 of them, came back as rated, but all carried the de facto claim that no, it was not related to my Gulf War.
Correct.
Gulf War, whatever you want to call it. I can't think of the word. But you know, they listed it as service connected, and to me, that's the only thing that makes me wonder about what the VA is doing, because it's they're not willing to say it is, but they're willing to say, well, because of my service, that it could be. But then I go all the way back to 1975 too, and I was stationed at a place where they actually kept Agent Orange. Although I was not a Vietnam War veteran or era, you know, it's almost like they knew something was there. They were just pacifying me because I did give 20 years. And the ones who didn't get the 20 years are being, to me, they are being denied wrongly.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one thing I posted several times on Google Plus, is the fact that when it comes to Gulf War veterans, we are at a 80% denial rate, you know. Even on the presumptives, like when I submitted my claims for fibromyalgia, IBS, etc. And it right there on, you know, on their own website, it says, if you look at fibromyalgia, it's a presumptive, and it says it right there in black and white. It does not have to be proven as service connected in order to get compensation for disability. However, when I submitted claims for such, you know, they were denied. They were denied. The appeal was denied. And then I had to fight it, finally going to a town hall meeting with the regional office. When the secretary of the VA started making these town hall meetings mandatory, I went to a town hall meeting down there with RO, and I laid into them pretty heavy. I told them flat out in front of the news media, in front of everybody, there was Vietnam vets there. There were World War II vets. There were a few of them, but, you know, I told them flat out, look, here's my case. I showed them my binder, and I told them, I'm not going to give up on this. But it really amazed me, the fact that it was about 8 days later, you know, they went over the records, and all of a sudden it was, you know, it came back approved. But
well, I will say, in the education and in the compensation side of it, the presumptions we've been given, other than the 9 infectious diseases, and that can be answered to also, but under the presumptions we've been given, they are so soft that any kind of condition that lends or adds to the credence of, for say, fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue, if you have a diagnosis of hypopituitarism, well, that's doing with your adrenal gland, but it creates other conditions of fatigue, of nausea, of imbalance. And it's more like we had to prove to them that our condition is proof that we got this. But in their condition, they've got something that says this is proof that you don't have it. There's too much of a gray area matter between the presumptions and a real diagnosis. And they don't know how to educate or actually, you know, work with the veteran for that.
yeah, and that's another thing I have noticed when it comes to dealing with Gulf War Illness. Talking with other veterans, what I've seen when it comes to the veterans benefits section, what they will try to do, if you submit a claim for IBS, they will try to, it's like they try to detour the item to something else and append it to something else and say, okay, it's not IBS, it's heck, they'll try to attribute it to like GERD or something else, right?
Correct.
Okay, since it's
You
this
see, they
health,
changed that term and not too long ago from IBS to functional gastrointestinal disorder. When you get into FGIDS, it is the biological process of the gastrointestinal system, not the structural. GERD, Barrett's esophagus, and that type is a structural type damage. If you
yeah,
have colitis or diverculitis, then you're talking about biological. You're getting into the bacteria, the parasites, and everything else that could possibly be. So, the VA is constantly changing their goalpost to fit what they need as far as education. And I'm sure they're getting pressure on digging into it a little bit deeper to make that determination. And that's why we're getting such a heavy denial rate. Plus the fact that psychosomatic enters into it. Everybody has said in the past and going forward that psychosomatic, it's all in your head kind of crap, is more prevalent in us than anything else. And it's wrong. It is definitely not psychosomatic. These are issues that are affected mainly by the central nervous system. Autonomic nervous system, immune deficiencies where it's in your blood, parasitic, biological, it's all in that area, but they're not willing to admit that yet.
exactly. Now, talking about neurological damage, see, I submitted a claim for that. However, I was never DX for diagnosed with anything neurological. Now, here's the problem. I remember, I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. The first time I started noticing something odd, you know, something was off, was I remember I used to get a twitch on my left eye, right on the bottom of my eyelid, right? And it would just twitch, 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 twitch like crazy. And little by little, it started working its way down. It started happening on my lip, down to my arm, left arm, and so on. And now it's, all the way down to my legs and so on, especially my calf muscle. Now, I was talking to a veteran at the local VA clinic, and we were comparing notes, and it was kind of funny the fact that, I was telling him about my experience with the neurological damage, and I started to mention, the fact that the first time I started seeing something on, I was the twitching of the eye, and just as I lifted my finger like that, he turned around, he did the exact same thing, right to the exact same location, and he completed my sentence. I was like, and he was just shocked, like, he was just blown away that, it was like I was talking about him and explained the whole thing, how it went down the arm and all that. He said, it's what you're talking about is a carbon copy of exactly what happened to me. Now, further talking a little bit more on the neurological damage, I have a tendency, I get the, I would say like jolts. I mean, they're just the best way that
Like you're falling off of a cliff all of a sudden.
No, it's kind of like I could be sitting in my recliner watching the movie, and so all of a sudden I will get a jolt of pain that shoots right up my spine
Yep.
for absolutely no reason, right? And vast majority of the times they tend to be along my spine, my back, my leg, and I've even had them on my stomach. Matter of fact, I had one time, you know, it hit me so hard that I jumped forward from my recliner and I almost fell down on the floor.
Yep.
The other thing that I have noticed, I mean, have you gotten those?
Oh, I've had those on and off for years and years. Especially after Desert Storm, it's I would get a shooting pain bad enough to take my knees completely out from underneath me, and I'd go to the floor. I've had shakes. Just all of a sudden I'd start shaking, and I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. It's like somebody with Parkinson's disease. You know how they shake, 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 shake?
Yeah.
And yeah, to me, and this is only something opinion as far in perspective of my part, the central nervous system is made up of electrical circuits. Just like an electrical circuit, if one spot goes haywire, if you're having something cut into an electrical circuit, it causes a short, and sparks and all kinds of crap fly. Well, same thing with a neurotransmitter system. You get into that, and you're talking down deep. These little short circuits lend itself to the fact that we have central nervous system damage. We've been altered somehow or another.
And here's another thing I have experienced, and we'll compare notes. When it comes to neurological damage, one of the things I have a tendency that happens to me is at times, I remember first it happening with my left hand, right? And it was like I could close my fist, I could close my fist, I could grab a glass, but I didn't have the strength. It was like my hand was totally failing to complete the function of what the brain was trying to tell it to do. The brain was telling it, okay, grab the glass and now lift the glass, but yet it was so weak that, the glass would just fall like I didn't have no grip.
Yes, same thing here too.
Okay.
I've had incidents like that. It's not constant, but every once in a while I'll feel like, I can't keep a grip on something. I noticed it when I was a maintenance guy, is when I was using a hammer. I used to be a carpenter when I was a kid. I used to help a carpenter out all the time, so I was used to using a hammer. But when I was working maintenance one day, I drew the hammer back like I was going to hit something, and the next thing I know, I'm coming forward, I don't have a hammer anymore. The hammer took off, and I didn't have a grip anymore. I used to be able to pick a chair up with one hand off the floor, and I can't do that anymore.
Okay.
I can't get the grip like I used to have, and it's not because I don't have the strength, because at times I've got strength enough.
It's like your body's failing to respond to what your brain is trying to tell it.
Exactly.
And see, here's another thing talking about that, right? And it's hard to explain to many people. I've had times where my leg will totally, for absolutely no reason. I'm working fine, blah, 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 going to the kitchen, and all of a sudden my left leg will just go, poof. It just totally gives out. It's like my leg totally said, I'm not listening to you,
Yeah.
And
now, it's been a long time, but my hips are starting to act like that right now too. It's scary because it's not just one side. It's both hips just feel like something's giving way, a weakness, sort of.
Exactly. That's interesting you say that, because of the fact that I remember several times, going up and down the stairs. My bedroom's on the first floor, but the kids' bedroom is up, on the second floor, and so on. And occasionally I go up there and so on. But I do remember on occasion going up the stairs, not so much, right? But going down, when I'm relieving the pressure off, I could kind of feel, it kind of felt like an odd sensation in my leg, right? I don't know how to explain it. The best way I can explain it, I felt like some kind of pressure that something was off. And what I would end up doing, because I've already, it's happened to me twice where my leg gave out and I went tumbling down the stairs. So now, whenever, for one, I avoid the stairs, but if I feel the pressure, I'll turn around and I'll reverse, and instead of walking down forward, I'll grab the guardrail and start going down backwards on it. So this way, if my leg gives out, I still have my hand, so that way I can just.
My wife calls me clumsy. Yeah, we were talking about, just losing function of a limb or something like that. My wife has called me clumsy. I've been coming downstairs, and for some reason, my feet don't lift up where I can go to the next step. I've actually fell down the stairs 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And it can get kind of rough on you if you do that. You catch yourself, but it's a little bit too late, and you come down with a hard thud. But no, I'm finding I'm doing that a lot more lately, and it's with stairs, it's kind of scary.
Oh yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm glad that my stairs are carpeted. But
I had to take
I
carpet
have.
off mine because it was happening too much with carpet on it. I had to go back to bare wood.
Okay. All right. So one thing I want to ask you is, you hear a lot of veterans where the Veterans Administration may have lost a lot of their records, their NODs, appeals, etc. Have you experienced any of that?
None at all. Um, Everything that I've got, uh, they have themselves. I've actually seen my C file before, and everything's there.
Okay. And one of the things I always tell veterans is your best bet, you want to make sure that you get your complete C file. And in my case, because of all the stuff that I was going through with the VBA, I called them up and I told them, look, I want every piece of paper. I'm sick and tired of all these denials. So I'm going to come down there and I will pick them up. And I did that. But I constantly tell veterans, you need to get all your files and get these things, like I have here, get them all organized so that you can, submit your appeals, and stop submitting, these incomplete claims. These I've seen. I mean, I've heard from veterans all the time where I ask them about their files and so on, and they'll tell me something like, oh, they have some in the closet and some of the files in the drawer, and that, you know, you need to quit that. You
I
need to
know.
get organized.
I'm
But
getting too old to quit that. One of these days, it'll get me.
all right, so I think, is there anything else you want to talk about? I mean, I think we pretty much covered everything.
The only thing I might add to this, and as advice from one veteran to another, documentation is almost priority. If you expect to get a claim, the documentation should be followed, civilian or VA. From the time that you started until the time that you file the claim, make sure that you have the documentation to back it up. I say that because in my position, I went with the VA strictly. I did it for a reason. One, because it was free, but the other reason is that I had enough trust in the VA to go ahead and do that. There's nothing wrong with civilian, but keep in mind that when you go with a civilian, they have no idea the differences between civilian life and military life. Okay? Although the civilian side has the OSHA and standards to go by and the safety boards and the National Labor Relations Board, we don't have that.
Roger.
Our standards are a little different, and in order to know what's going on within the military lifestyle takes a military person or a military trained person to understand. It's important that the Veterans Administration go on. Do we have problems? Well, yeah, we definitely have problems. We need to get it worked out.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any reason why we can't.
And, you know, talking about the BABA, you know, there was, sorry about that, talking about the Veterans Administration, there was a lot of focus in the news media on the healthcare side. However, there was very little focus very little spotlight put onto the veteran benefits section. See, a lot of people tend to think of the VA as one VA, and that's not, you know, that's not correct. You have, you know, the VA healthcare system, that's one entity. You have the VA, the Veterans Benefits Administration, which has to deal with compensation, you know, pension and compensation. There's the third entity. I don't recall. Do you remember offhand what that is?
There is no real third entity, except for you have a what they call an Office of Inspector General, who monitors the two.
Yeah. But the main thing, though, is that the healthcare and the benefits section are two separate entities. They fall under the VA umbrella, but they're independent.
Exactly, and you can't mix them.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the things that I've been trying to do is bring to spotlight, you know, on the Google Plus page is the fact that, hey, what you're seeing on the healthcare side, you are also we are experiencing that on the benefits section. You know, bring that into the spotlight, the fact that, look, veterans are submitting, you know, I can understand, you know, you're going to have your bad apples. You're always going to have that. You're going to have veterans that will submit bogus claims, or they will submit, you know, an you know, a incomplete claim and so on. But, you know, when it comes to Gull War Illness, when you have 80% of them being denied, that right there should tell you something, you know, something's not right, you know.
You might be thinking the third entity as the judicial side, because although it's part of the benefits side, it is a separate entity to oversee the benefits, which is the judicial system on it.
Do you realize that the VA has actually over 900 attorneys?
Oh, yes. I don't know if you realize it or not, that every VARO, regional office that we go through, they actually have a physician on call to look at some of these. If they have any question whatsoever, they have a physician sitting there to make a determination too. It did happen to me. I worked through the DAV on my rheumatoid arthritis claim, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And the DAV said, well, they're trying to determine right now at the VARO whether it's going to be 40% or 60%. But they said they have to get with a physician to make the determination. And I said, they have a physician there? Yes, they do. And when it went to the physician, they denied it solely based on the fact that the CMP examiner had put due to genetic component. Okay? So they have somebody there at the educating level to look at that is a professional doctor. And everybody thinks that it's an objective type look. In other words, they have nothing in their own personal views that are used as education. And I submit that that is not correct.
Is
Because
that
there is no, when you talk about rheumatoid arthritis, I can talk about it all day long. They don't know. Even the Arthritis Foundation cannot determine whether it's a genetic, heritage, hereditary, or an environmental condition that causes rheumatoid arthritis. They've been looking at it for years. As a matter of fact, the VA has a registry for rheumatoid arthritis that I didn't know about.
well? It's just like when I submitted the initial claim. I specifically said, look, I'm submitting a claim for fibromyalgia, and I put it right on there. I said it is a presumptive, and I gave the web link, the policy that covers it, CFR 38, and right there on the claim. I mean, it was a complete claim, saying, hey, one each, fibromyalgia, for Gull War Illness. It falls under this. Here's the link with the information. And yet it still came back, and when my CMP was conducted, the examiner had, I think it's funny now, because what the examiner wrote down on there on the evaluation was basically, oh, you have fibromyalgia because you're just flat out getting old. It's part of getting old. And when I saw that statement on there, I was like, wait a minute. I've been complaining about this since 32. Now, is 32, I mean, if 32 is the new old, something's wrong, So, in essence, he was trying to say, oh, you have fibromyalgia at 32 because you're an old fart.
They've been telling me that since I was 38, and I'm 58 now. And this thing about getting old, at first I told him, I said, this ain't about getting old. I says, I'm not having this because I'm old. I'm having this because something is going wrong. And since I've been in the VA system and I've been under the care of one doctor, I've not changed doctors, he has seen a progression, and he has not been able to figure out why that progression has gone from what he's seen when he initially seen me to what it is today. He said it's just incredible the amount of change that's happened and occurred over that time frame. Yeah. In 20 years, he says, I cannot believe what I'm seeing.
Exactly.
So it does help to get one, stay with them, and they can see it. They can see the progression. It's not just about getting old.
Yeah. And one of the things I've been trying lately here, just a couple of tips for any other veteran that might be watching this, any other veteran suffering from Gull War Illness. Number one, when it comes to fibromyalgia, IBS, and so on, your ailments, you cannot sit down on your behind and, you cannot sit down and roll over and play dead. You have to get off your butt and fight this. IBS, you have to watch your diet. One thing I have learned is stay away from processed foods, sugars. Sugars are a big no-no when it comes to IBS. Processed foods, chips, soda, I stay away from that stuff. So I've changed my diet pretty much to natural foods, fruits and vegetables. I do eat meat, but I stay away from all that GMO crap. Your body's not meant to, is not built that way to take all this processed crap. And us suffering from Gull War Illness, that doesn't help. Fibromyalgia, a couple tips I'm going to give some veterans, right, is I've been taking a supplement, and it's CoQ10, right? And I can tell you that this stuff right here, I take 100 milligrams in the morning when I wake up with my cup of coffee, and 100 milligrams about mid-afternoon. And this stuff right here, it hasn't been the magic pill. I can, I'm not going to sit here saying, oh, this is the magic pill. No, it's not. But I can tell you right now, that has made a difference between me continuing to, wanting to continue to fight on, or just rolling over and playing dead.
Oh
Vitamin.
yeah, and I completely I agree with you. You cannot roll over and play dead with this. You have to be able to continue the fight. You have to create your own atmosphere that you're going to beat this thing. If you don't have that motivation to help yourself out and to go forward, it you might as well just give up and go into a home somewhere. That's all there is to it. You have to be able to continue the fight.
Exactly. The other thing, a couple of other things, because of the fact that veterans like ourselves suffering from Gulf War illness, it's a known fact that our autoimmune system is shot. I mean, our autoimmune system is so weak that if you don't even have to sneeze around me. You could just say "achoo," and it's like, oh, get away from me.
Yeah.
And one of the other things I've been doing is taking vitamin C. Matter of fact, my VA PCP has me on a high dose vitamin D because every time I go in there and they test my blood, it comes back vitamin D deficient. Vitamin C, and I also take probiotics for the digestive system. And the probiotics has helped me with the IBS controlling. Now, suffering from Gulf War illness, I still get my flare-ups. You know how we still get our flare-ups and so on.
Yeah.
I still get them. However, they seem to be less intense now. Now that I have taken control of the parameters, and I've decided, look, I'm not going to lay down and I'm not going to punk out on this. I'm going to fight this to the end.
I also will stress the point too is, and you're right, the flare-ups come and they seem to be less intense. The more you work with it, the more you learn about it, the more you try to adapt to it. But I also want to go with the proactive side of this too, is find a moderation that will help. What I want to say is if you overstress, if you push yourself like you used to, the old saying, no pain, no gain, so you push yourself to, well, you can't do that anymore.
You're correct.
Take a moderate level to stress, just like moderate level to, you don't want to eat sugar by the teaspoons. You know, you have to take the moderation. You have to moderate that stress level now. And that's the hardest thing, especially for a veteran.
Yeah.
Get over.
And that's one thing. That's another thing I have learned is you have to, talking about the stressors, I've really noticed that stressing out about anything, family drama, whatever, anything that puts stress on your system is going to weaken your immune system, right? So you have to be able to learn, look, you stressing over this item, whatever it may be, whether it's bills, family issues, or whatever, you have to realize, hey, me stressing over it is not going to help. It's not going to help matters. And matter of fact, it's going to weaken my immune system. It's going to make it worse. I'm going to start getting heart palpitations because, I started getting heart palpitations too and all that. And, whenever I get to that point where I feel like, okay, I'm starting to stress out, I back up, I turn around, pull away. Even if I have to go into my own room, I will close the door, draw the shades, and if I have to, I'll meditate. You
Yep.
know, whatever it takes. You know, whatever you have to do.
Anything to control it. Anything to control it. You have to control it, not let it control you. And that goes back to the old thing too. It's the mental health side of it didn't happen first. What our condition has caused is a mental health condition. Our physical ailments cause our mental health conditions. Our anxiety, our stress levels, our anger, our irritability, and everything else. That's what created it. So.
Wow, that's one of the things I remember. In submitting my claims, the VA was trying to push PTSD on me, and I refused it. I said, look, I don't suffer from PTSD. If anything, yeah, I get depressed. I'm getting depressed, and I get angry because of what you're putting me through. So, you know, me fighting, having to prove myself. I mean, it was easier to go to war than having to fight with the VA. And I told them, if anything, I'm not suffering from PTSD. If anything, I'm suffering from VASD. You guys are giving me a case of the Veterans Administration, VASD version.
Yeah. I agree with that. That's all I've got as far as, you know, additional. So, is there any other questions you need?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. All right, and all right. Well, I want to thank you, David, for giving me this opportunity to interview you. And for any other vet that's sitting out there watching this, I want to close out with telling you, look, do not give up. You submit your claims with the VA, and if they reject your claims, you don't roll over and play dead. If you're over there suffering, we're all suffering. You know, my brother over here, David, he's in pain. I'm in pain every single day. But you know what? You don't see us rolling over and playing dead. You need to get off. You need to get off. You need to. It's bottom line. What it comes down to is fall in, right face, forward march, double time. Let's go. We need to get off our ass. Sorry. We need to get off our butt and kick some butt. Get this done. We need to bring it to the politicians' attention and let them know, hey, look, you know, we're not going to take this. We're not going to roll over and have you guys just ignore us and just expect us to just hide in the corner and die off, you know.
Exactly. Agree with you completely, Glenn.
All right. I'll talk to you later, David.
All right. Take care, my friend.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.